movies for black girl nerds.
Thank you, everyone, for your time for this beautiful project and all your talent and abilities that you brought to it. It was very, very beautiful. Zach, beginning with you, since the music is and the movement is the critical storytelling vehicle for it, when you take your initial concept and you get together with your producer, how do you begin to carve out and kind of fine tune exactly what you want the sound and the movement to look like?
That's
Because
a
what
really
you
great.
have in your mind is one thing, but then it has to be built out.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had a lot of references that I would show people to try to get them in the same mind space. 99.999% of it was Keone and Mari. And so that was a little bit easier, especially once we found out that they were actually going to join the project. But I did cut together kind of a super cut of their dance moves to show their scale, that they can go very small and very intimate and very emotional, but they can also go very big and very broad and very happy, to show that we were going to be able to hit the emotional range of this film. And then for the music, I created a Spotify playlist, where it was all music that just made me want to move. And 90% of it was kind of the soul funk genre. Some of it was from theater, things like that. Some of it was from movies. Some of it was, Bruno Mars or something like that, where it's kind of emulating that style. But just anything to kind of put you in the zone of like, it's going to feel like this, it's going to move like this, and it's going to be about this, was kind of the way I tried to corral people into understanding, what this thing was, because it's very abstract from the beginning. It's a little bit of a thinker as far as like what specifically the end result is going to look and sound like.
Mhm. For Keone and Mari, when we talked to Brad earlier, he talked about how each of the dance sequences during the planning of it was like conversations on the bridge, on the bench. As the choreographers, how do you start to shape those conversations? Do you look at them as four distinct different numbers? Are they all kind of blossoms from the same tree? How do you begin to shape how you want each of those conversations to look visually?
Yeah, well, hello, first of all. Uh, Zach and Brad did a really great job of giving us all the context, subtext information. We were very communicative from the very beginning about, having as close as final to the music as possible, because a melody change could change a move. There's an example of dots, which there's a da 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 kind of in the music, but if it was da da da, we probably would have gone the other way. And so there's like all those choices in there, and having all that context, and then understanding the arc of Art and Dot's journey, and how movement wise it would move through that. So the movement has its own arc. Art and Dot being small and gestural in the beginning, and then you see their movement get bigger and bigger, and then we come back to this small movement again. But there's something so powerful about that. That moment when Art is running after the rain and he drops, and even though he stops dancing, he steps to the piano, and that small movement is even so choreographed. It's important that it's all there. It's still living within them, throughout it all. So again, having Zach and Zach's articulation of all the information just allowed us to do what we always do, which is tell stories through dance and implement those motifs with the hats, or any little things we can add in there. Yeah.
Mari, so when you look at this and now as performers, you were once little children who just liked to dance. And then now it evolves into this and you get to see yourself immortalized and your abilities and talent in a whole nother way. How does that affect you as a dancer now to go beyond just the digital and seeing you in your true forms to seeing you in an artistic way, in a different type of artistic way?
It's surreal. It's overwhelming. It's a huge honor to, I mean, Disney animation is such a huge legacy. And we grew up with watching Disney animation movies as children, and still love watching them as adults and share it with our daughter now. So to be contributing to it in any way is really overwhelming. And I remember when I get to talk about it, or when we watch the film again, it kind of like comes back and feels real, and then it comes into a dream, and then it comes back. So it's kind of like this never-ending realization, but it's really crazy. And I think what's so cool about it is that, just like you said, dance, it's such a ephemeral thing. It lives, and especially if you're experiencing it live, it like only lives for that moment, and then it's that moment is gone. But to have it, like you said, immortalized in this one thing that will live now, it's pretty crazy that we get to have that as dancers, because that doesn't always get to happen.
It's special. Somebody might be using that to teach someone one day, and then it just goes in a whole nother direction. It's beautiful. And this gentleman, Zach, who wrote this beautiful story and gave us this beautiful story, to see your movement kind of encapsulated in it. Zach, living in this space with short film, and now short film without dialogue, how has this sharpened your tools as a filmmaker? Because it's a whole nother different lane of storytelling than what we're used to within a traditional film with the traditional arc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole process was a massive learning experience for me. I've gotten to direct on even smaller scale with Puddles. With this, it was, interacting with talent outside of the animation building. That was a whole new thing for me, and what that means and what kind of information they need in order to do their jobs properly, which forces me to think even more deeply about the characters in every shot and why everything is there. And then, going through the development process at Disney as well taught me a lot about myself and my voice and what kinds of stories I want to tell. And so going forward, taking all of these experiences of all the departments I interacted with, the people I got to work with, and really seeing myself more and more as a filmmaker gives me the confidence that, any weird idea I have in my head, we might be able to actually pull it off, because this one was pretty crazy, and it turned out beautifully if you have the right people around you.
For sure. So do you think that animation is the absolute sweet spot for you? Is doing non-animation still an interest of yours, or does that become kind of in the passion category? Or is this the magnum opus area for you?
I'm happy to do anything if it is storytelling. If it's a series, if it's a film, if it's a short, if it's a play, if it's live action, animated, whatever, like if I get to be around creative, talented people who are trying to communicate something that they care about, I'm there in whatever capacity I can be. So yeah, anything that I can do, as long as it's something I care about and the people that are making it with me care about it, then I'm there.
And lastly, Keone Mari, once you got to see the finished thing on the screen, how did you react? Did you cry? Did you give it a fist pump? Like, how did you guys react to when you finally got to see the whole thing?
I think it was a combination of all of the things, fist pumping while crying. And I think it was immediately probably at the opening Steamboat Mickey, and realizing it's all real, and then just the amount of tears escalating as the piece goes on, especially when we get to the end. I think there is a reaction video of us too that maybe we'll see the light of day someday. But no, it's a wave of emotions, because it's not just, it's the film. The film is so emotional by itself, but just to think about our journey as creatives, but also the journey of dance, and for dance being represented, for these characters that are getting represented on screen. And there's just so many things about this film that just resonated with us, and it just, oh man, it hit us hard when we first saw it. But, yeah.
I think it hit us hard before we even saw the final version. It was just like a draft, and we were a mess. So it gets us every time. Every time I watch it, I react emotionally. I cry every time I watch it. It's very special, and we're so thankful to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, I thank you all. This is just a beautiful project. I've watched it a bunch of times now, and it just gets better and better every time I see it because I notice different things, and it's super cool. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for your time today in this beautiful, joyful, just heart-touching project. And I'm always intrigued by the origins of these things. If it's a chicken or an egg type of thing, do you know the team is all together before you embark, or does the team come together once the director gets the green light to do his project? Beginning with you, Brad, which was it? Do you all get together with Zach and say, I wonder why I brought you here today? Here's the project. Or do you go out after speaking with him and saying, hey, I think that Pinar and all these other people can create this tone that you want for us again?
It's a really great question. We have an internal process, and then for collaborators externally, like Pinar and Keone and Mari, that's a different process. So I'll go over the first one first. So our heads of departments, so we have a head of layout, anim, tech anim, effects, lighting, and stereo. So we have 6 leaders, and then we have a visual effects supervisor that kind of goes over all of them. And the way our process works is once the studio says, Zach, we're gonna, or any filmmaker, we say, hey, we would love you to tell your story. And he pitches the story, and then they start the development process. Once it's kind of along far enough in development where we know there's gonna be a story there, then they assign a producer. And I was lucky enough to be assigned to Zach. And then at that point, Zach and I have some initial conversations about what the demands would be for this particular project. But then internally, we let anybody in each department apply. Anybody can put their name in and interview to be that position that I named. And then we start with the visual effects supervisor, and then we interview for all the other departments. And in this particular case, with a short like this, we try to give opportunities to people that haven't had them. So on this movie, I think four of the 6 leaders were new leaders that had never led before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fact. Because we, as lay people, who we just show up and go, it's amazing, like Thanksgiving dinner, and we didn't see all the chopping and the stuff that happens in the kitchen before we get there. For you, Pinar, the sound of joy, it's such a joyous sound. It's beautiful, the organs, and me in particular with Southern roots, I think of the church and happiness and joy with those sounds. So how do you decide upon, as a composer, that this is the instrument or this is the guiding force for joy, as opposed to other instruments that people associate with joy?
That's such a great question. I mean, that's such a subjective opinion too, right? For depending on where you're from in different parts of the world, joy means something else, especially as it relates to music. When we talked with Zach at first, we were talking about, what kind of genre that we want to play around with, because we want to capture what Art and Dot would dance to when they were younger. So that already kind of put us in a, more or less within a couple decades of 60s 70s vibe kind of thing. So we were thinking, okay, we could have been jazz, it could have been a lot of different things. Funk and soul is where we kind of landed, which I love very, very much. And then the organs and the whirly and the bass stuff, all of that, for me, it was really fun, because we had to put a bit of, because there's no dialogue, no spoken word, those instruments became their voice, so to speak. So like when Art's on the chair and with the recliner, all of those movements with the bass, and as Dot comes in with just her movements, everything, it all had to translate into something. So I don't know, just all of those kind of became organic choices once we decided on the genre and the overall groove and vibe. We played around with it, and it was kind of unanimous, I think, when we kind of came up with it. It felt right.
It felt good. It felt so fun, even in those sad moments when Pops is trying to get himself together or get off, and he realizes he's kind of chasing something that it's still there, but we all have to confront our own mortality at some point. I've been wearing glasses recently, so I get it. I get it when you're trying to chase something. Brad, back on the production side. Now we have the man. Listen, my kid is starting college next year, and I just have turned into my mom, and I can't.
Yeah, we all are.
With us again, it combines so many beautiful elements, not just the sounds, but the movements and working with the choreographers and things. At what point do you do the normal dailies where you watch everything every single day like a traditional film, or in a project it's shorter and it has a different arc of storytelling? How often do you have to revisit the material to realize, okay, this is it, we're going in the right direction?
Man, you know your stuff. You know what you're talking about here. So the process, the process, it's a little bit of a tricky answer. So the end of the process, once we've really kind of landed, and once Pinar had completed the first pass of the music, and we got the choreography, and then it was about executing the shots, right? That was all very traditional, our normal traditional process. Prior to that, on a feature, we have what we call screening cycles. So we do a screening every about 12 weeks. It's wishy-washy a little bit. On this, we did 4 screenings, but 2 of them were completely different. I mean, it was the same theme, it was the same characters, but the journey was completely different. And so we played around a lot. We worked with Pinar and worked with Keone and Mari and kept them up to speed on what we were doing, and got feedback from a couple different teams internally. We had a group that we met with constantly when we'd have stuff and show to them and then get notes. But once we kind of locked it, once we knew that this was the path of action of, this was literally the path they were going to take. These were the conversations. We call them conversations in the apartment, on the bridge when they get old, at the railing when he's running from the rain, and then on the pier before he breaks away from her. These were all conversations that we planned to. So once we had that structure, it was pretty much the normal animation process.
And with those conversations, it's just the sounds. Like, my brain doesn't operate that way, and with that sort of musicality. And I mean, it is incredible people like you who have that talent and that ability. So where do you go? So you've identified what the joy sound will be for when they're connecting. Where do you take yourself to think, okay, this is going to sound like sadness? Is it a matter of creating like an entirely different sound, or is it just kind of sprouts off of the original joyous organ sounds? How do you craft all those other layered conversational sounds for their storytelling?
So Zach did this really special thing, which I hadn't seen any director do before. When we started, he created an emotional map for me. There was literally a diagram of it was almost like a PowerPoint represent. I don't know what you call it, but basically it kind of looked like a cardiogram a little bit, but with like color coded and everything, with emotions, basically. Like, this is where sadness comes in, and this is where just like, all of these things mapped out for me, which was really helpful, because when I started, there was really nothing to write to, other than a concept. So that was incredibly, really, 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 really helpful to get me started on the right path, just to even know, how long are we in that mode? Okay, we have that moment, but for how long are we going to be sad, or whatever it is that we're doing? So that really kind of dictated my first approach. And when the first pass, I had the themes and everything. So molding that is just just composition, making something sadder or joyful. That's where the instrumentation and arrangement comes in. And we talked about the arrangement as well, how instrumentation, where we want it, and everything was very, very intentional. Even the parts where it sounds like the trumpet's just playing a solo, that solo was written out exactly, note and second by second, exactly how it needed to be, because it was all animated to that.
How many trumpet players did we have to get you to hit, you got them to hit those notes? It was pretty intense.
It was pretty intense. I mean, so when I first wrote, I didn't, especially that kind of genre, you usually write out the map and then you let the soloists do their thing. That's a very traditional kind of way of doing it. But in this one, because it all had to be intentional, I wrote out the solo, but it's one thing when you do the mock-up, nobody's breathing in the mock-up, then when we put it into the actual live situation, they were really, really, really tough. And I joked about it the other day on Facebook when we posted something. I was like, no trumpet players were harmed during the making of the score. It's a really tough part to play. We made it work. I mean, honestly, we've had the best musicians in the entire signal flow of this film, to be honest, in every aspect, and definitely in the band that we had, they were just top musicians, so they nailed it all.
It was beautiful, and I enjoyed it from beginning to the end. I got my little, my little heart check, and it was just lovely. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I love knowing these things because it makes me good at cocktail parties.
Now, there you go. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
You too. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.
Better shake your booties for black girl nerves. Better shake your booties for black girl nerves.